views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hey, hello, everybody. My name's Kevin Monahan, Manhattan College graduate, formerly from NBC Sports. Today would have been the Manhattan College High School Cross Country Invitational, but for a lot of reasons, we don't have a meet this year. We do have, we have a really good panel who we're going to talk. I'll just introduce our panel right now. I'll do that in alphabetical order. First off, we have a two-time U.S. Olympian, four-time national champ. He was ranked #1 nationally in the mile at Power Memorial High School, and he ran 3:43.4, which was it's a record that 40 years later for New York State still holds. Ran at Manhattan College as a freshman. He was one of my classmates. Transferred to Oregon, where he broke Steve Prefontaine's 1,500-meter record, running 3:36.7. He's now the cross-country track and field director at Manhattan College, formerly coached at St. John's and American. His daughter, Lauren, competed at Stanford, and she qualified for the 2012 U.S. Olympic team. And his son, Matthew, I guess you heard about him. He won the gold medal in Rio, the first American in 58 years. That's Matt Centrowitz. Next, we have, big hand. Next, we have Lisa. I'll introduce Lisa first. Former cross-country and distance star at Brooklyn's Bishop Ford High School. When that closed, she went to Bishop Kearny, where she was coached by John Lovett, college coach. She was a perennial All-MAC winner. She's now prepping for physical therapy at Hunter College. Lisa established 6 individual school records in Manhattan, along with 2 record-setting distance medley relay, and she ran a 15:04 high school best at Van Cortlandt Park. Lisa Fajardo. Next, a U.S. 1,500-meter semifinalist at the 2015 World Championships in Beijing. She was the winner of the Penn Relays Mile in 2015, a semifinalist at the U.S. Track and Field Trials in the 1,500 meters in 2016, Fordham Hall of Famer, now the head cross-country, distance, and middle distance coach at Manhattan College. She ran a personal best, 16:08, and winning the Brooklyn Queens High School Championship for Bishop Kearny High School, and that's Carrie Gallagher. Next, an all-time U.S. running great, New Jersey schoolboy who became the 3rd American high school runner to break 4 minutes in the mile, twice ranked the #1 miler in the world, once at 5,000 meters, winner of the famed Dream Mile, where he beat Jim Ryan with a 3:54.6 time. Later, he set another personal best, 3:52.2, when he finished behind Filbert Bailly's world record at the Martin Luther King Games in Jamaica. In cross country at Essex Catholic High School, Marty established a new Van Cortlandt Park boys high school record of 12:30.23.2. He's a very successful businessman who founded Athletic Attic, a longtime track and field analyst on air for NBC and for ABC, and now a noted jazz guitarist in Gainesville, Florida, Marty LaCourty. And last but not least, we have a Fordham Hall of Fame middle distance runner, one-time training partner of Marty LaCourty, former ASICS North America CEO, and currently founder and CEO of Top League Advisory that focuses on brand vision and strategy. Over 40 years of professional experience in the athletic merchandise business, including 21 years at Nike, where he was head of sales for their Michael Jordan brand. He ran at 12:23.8 personal best at Van Cortlandt Park, while a runner at All Hallows, was a winner in the very first Manhattan College Cross Country Invitational back in 1973, was a founding member of the Van Cortlandt Park Conservatory. In a 1979 New York Times article called "Chasing the 4-Minute Mile Along the New York," he wrote, "I ran Van Cortlandt like I own the place." G. McCarthy. So that's our panel, pretty good panel. And what I want to first start, since today would have been the Manhattan College Cross Country Invitational, I wanted to maybe talk to Carrie first about the status of the meet and what you're thinking moving forward.
Sure, Kevin, thank you. The high school meet, the Manhattan College Cross Country Invitational, has been a staple in Van Cortlandt Park for it was 47 years last year. This would have been the 48th year. So we wanted to make sure that this year, not only did we honor the date, did we honor the event, but we positioned ourselves to make sure that when we come back next year, which we will, that it's bigger and better and continues to grow to be bigger and better, as we have been able to do every year in a lot of different ways. So this year we've put on some creative virtual programming, this panel included, to hopefully keep the running community engaged, keep us engaged with each other. We have an alumni challenge out of Manhattan College to get people out and running the distance. So there's a lot of different ways that we've tried to tie in the spirit of the event and keep the momentum going, so that when we do come back to Van Cortlandt Park next year, that we still have all of the excitement that carried off of last year into this year and will carry into next year. So we're excited to be back. We're sad to not be there today at the park, but definitely looking forward to all the other events that we were able to put together in its place.
When Matt and myself were freshmen in Manhattan, this legendary guy named Ed Bowes, who was a Manhattan grad, coach at Bishop Loughlin, he noticed that the NYU meet was no longer going to be able to run, so he grabbed the date. He created a meet in 1973. I think he had 12 races, 2,000 runners. His goal was to make it the biggest and the best race ever. Sadly, Ed Bowes ran the Manhattan College Invitational for many years. It did become one of the biggest, if not the biggest meet in the country. Sadly, Ed died last year. But the good news is it was really terrific for Manhattan College last year to honor Ed. So right along Broadway, where you finished the race, they renamed it Ed Bowes Way. Matt, he was a big proponent of cross country, high school running in New York City. What do you remember about Ed Bowes?
Yes, Ed loved cross country. He was a good top cross country runner from Manhattan College, and he seemed to like the spirit of cross country. Not many people can honestly, guys like Marty and myself and Gene, we did cross country to get in shape for track. But Mr. Bowes loved cross country, loved the hills at Van Cortlandt Park, and we never got tired of talking strategy about how to attack a hill and how to kill your opponent up a hill. He would talk in those terms in the 70s, which would fire every high school kid up. And, it was just, every time you saw a hill, I would always think of Ed Bowes, that he'd want me to charge up this hill and destroy my competition, which didn't happen all the time, but it was a good talk.
One of the Ed Bowes is always thought about with Bishop Loughlin, with track, and with cross country. But one of the things that people forget about Ed Bowes is, for a long time, there were no women's track and field in the Catholic leagues in New York. Every year, Ed Bowes would bring it up. He would try to say we should add women's track, and always fell on deaf ears. When there was a school called Bishop McDonald, it was in Brooklyn. It was an all-girls school. They closed. They merged with Loughlin. So Eddie immediately brought the girls on and had them train with the boys. worked closely with Fred Thompson and Adams Track Club, and, and stopping girls track in the Catholic League. He went to the meeting that day, and with this guy not there, got women's track and field in for the Catholic League. But Carrie and Lisa, maybe you could talk about bows and women's track in New York.
Sure. Maybe, Lisa, if you don't mind, I can kind of start and then hand it off to you, since I was maybe running girls' high school track a little earlier than you.
Yeah, I think so.
But yeah, I think often about all the opportunities that I had as a high school athlete in the Catholic High School League, and how it traces back to Ed Bowes taking that team, taking that initiative, and taking the risk to go against many of his contemporaries to get girls' high school cross country and track going. And so I was fortunate and spoiled, and definitely had no idea how spoiled I was to grow up competing at Van Cortlandt Park in CHSAA meets at the Armory track, one of the fastest tracks in the world at the time, and still is, to be able to compete in those types of meets on those type of facilities was all started with Ed Bowes, and he never stepped away from it. One of my first memories of Ed Bowes before I really even knew him was him checking us in for an event at one of the meets. And he's one of those people that is so well connected and knows everybody by name. And so he knew Bishop Kearny High School well, and he knew my high school coach, John Lovett, very well. So I just remember this one time I went in to check in for my race. I said, Carrie Gallagher, Bishop Kearny High School. And he said, oh, Bishop Lovett. And I started freaking out. I said, no, not Bishop Lovett, Bishop Kearny. Bishop Kearny said, go sit down, your race is in 5 minutes. But he always brought like a great spirit to the track and opened up so many opportunities. And here I want to pass it on to Lisa, because she certainly benefited from a lot of great opportunities like the Lachlan Games and such. So Lisa, I'd love to hear your experience.
Oh yeah. I mean, first of all, I'm just so grateful to have been a part of women's cross country, because I started my freshman year of high school, and I think my life would have been 100% different had I not had that opportunity. But as far as Bishop Lachlan Games and everything that we have, thanks to Ed Bowes, I mean, that was one of my favorite meets. It was one of the first big meets that I went to as a high schooler, because we always pretty much stuck to, the CHAA intersectionals and just things within our league. So going to Bishop Lachlan Games was such an exciting experience to see all these different schools from all over the country. And I remember it was my dream since the first time I went to it to be able to run in the Invitational mile. And it took a few years to get there. And I think Mr. Lovett's connections helped me get there a little bit my senior year, but hey, I got to it. And I was fortunately able to steal the last medal, 6th place. So that was amazing.
Obviously, one of the benefits of the Manhattan College Invitational is Van Cortlandt Park. Van Cortlandt Park is known nationally as a place where all the top runners have kind of tested themselves. Matt, Marty, G. McCarthy, Lisa, and Carrie, you guys have all run Van Cortlandt Park. So maybe I'll start with Marty. Marty, talk to us about maybe the first time that you ran at Van Cortlandt Park and what the park meant to you.
Well, yeah, I can almost remember it very well, because I'm coming from a little town in New Jersey. And think about it, there's not many sports where there's 2,000 people participating. So it's almost like, cue the movie music. You step off that bus, and if you're a freshman, I had probably never seen 2,000 people before in my life. And you're like, whoa, this is a big world out here. And, Matt said, well, we were doing it to get in shape for track. I'm not so sure that was our attitude, because Fred Dwyer was our coach, and we'd had a great history in cross country. So through high school, maybe cross country was more important to us. And then there was the Penn relays, but the whole scene at Van Cortlandt was just unreal for a young kid. And to have the gun go off and have to race 2,000 people to the first pole. It's just overwhelming. I would maybe say that I never got that nervous again. And the only time I ever fainted in a race, in the final stretch, I had bronchitis and I passed out on what seems like coals on that horse path there. And so I can still remember that. And I guess what I'm saying, out of 10 things I remember about running, maybe 2 or 3 of them are about Van Cortlandt Park. And of course, as Matt's talking about the hills, I think there was a lot of strategy, but I think Ed Bowles told you the wrong thing. My strategy on the hills was to let the guy get a lead, make a lot of noise so he thinks he's broken you, and then on the backside with your long legs, try and catch up. But if you had short legs, then yeah, you want to go up. You're going to get beat going back down. And one other thing I still remember is, there were not boulders, but let's say rocks the size of basketballs that were and you've got to run them with spikes on. And Gene said he owned Van Cortlandt Park, which is very interesting to me because Gene has about the weakest ankles of any runner I ever had. We would go into the woods, and I have really strong ankles, and we'd run in the woods, and he'd, like twist his leg 3 times. So I didn't know he was that confident running over Van Cortlandt Park.
Well, I'm going to jump in there, Kevin. I think this is time for a little retort there because I joined Marty in, I took cross country very seriously, and I'll tell you why. Our coach, John Mulligan, who was from Power Memorial, but now is the head coach at All Hallows, he lived in Riverdale. So we practiced every day at Van Cortlandt Park. And I had the advantage of learning every rock, twig, leaf that was on, including the day before a race, that was on that course, because I didn't have the amazing physiques of our wonderful guests, Marty and Matt. I'm just a little guy, 5'7", 130 pounds, and I had to go out and lead from the beginning and finish, in first place. I mean, and I did that, like Marty said too. I was overwhelmed at seeing 2,000 kids from all different schools. I didn't even know anybody growing up in the Bronx that lived in Brooklyn or Queens, never mind saw them. So I took Van Cortlandt Park very, very seriously. But the other thing about the back hills is that, you're sprinting. There's maybe 150 kids lined up on an imaginary line. And then you sprint for a quarter of a mile across the cow pasture. And then everything narrows to a point where only 2 people possibly could go shoulder to shoulder in those hills. And that was where the race was won. And the interesting part about it is nobody was back there to see it. All of the fans were waiting on that one home stretch that came right off the Deegan or wherever it was. So I think there was an art to running cross country. And I also want to make one other comment, but that might stimulate a little conversation. So Kerry and Lisa, you guys had the benefit of the Armory. The Armory had, as you said, one of the fastest indoor tracks, maybe in America, if not the world. Not when we ran there. It was it was a shelter for homeless people. It was a wooden floor. It was a wooden floor. I even have splinters in a vial with cotton that were removed from my behind when I slipped one time because of the oil on the floor at Columbia Presbyterian Hospital. And the same thing goes for Van Cortlandt. Van Cortlandt was, the course was a mess back then. Now it's like a carpet when I went to see it a few years ago. So I beg the debate sometime, if not now, but in the future, of what records stand the most based on the condition of the course. So that's my retort. And Marty, you're right, my ankles are terrible.
Lisa, why don't you talk a little bit about Van Cortlandt Park?
Me?
Well, as Gene said, there's a lot to it, knowing how to run it. And I didn't know, I guess I'd forgotten that Gene had that advantage. But everybody's got, coaches like to say, run your own race. If you run your own race at Van Cortlandt, you're probably going to run poorly because some guys need to get to that pole first, and other guys probably should take it easy. Other people know they're strong in the hills or not. So you can't really run your own race when you're the three of us who are trying to win the race. But in a sense, everybody is running against somebody. You might be vying for 10th or 20th place, but you are running against a guy or a girl that you've been running against all season. So you're always aware of where they are, and you got to come up with a plan for that. And it kind of like in the Olympics, you just don't look at times in the Olympics and say, well, I can run faster than that guy, because you don't know how the race is going to be run. So at Van Cortlandt, you know, maybe it's not to your advantage to sprint to the first pole. Certainly you don't sprint to the pole. You really got to go wide so that you don't spend 5 seconds going around that pole in that subway rush. Run the extra yard and go wide. So I think, you know, cross country takes a lot more strategy than running on the track. And certainly Van Cortlandt did. And maybe the three of us or all of us had the benefit of knowing that course when people from upstate New York, or they started to come up from Virginia, because that's where the college coaches, you know, your whole future. I mean, forget about getting off the bus and realizing you got 2,000 people. Now you're a senior, that nervousness doesn't go away, because, you know, I just read about a guy on Facebook yesterday, and he went to some small college, but Coach Timmons from Kansas was at Van Cortlandt Park to watch him run. And he ran the race, and after the race, Timmons wasn't interested in him anymore. And he went to some, you know, small college up in Boston. But he said he had beaten all the guys at Kansas at the NCAA his senior year. But so there's that, you know, tension of knowing that your future could depend on this race. You can run great at the Penn Relays, but that's in April. A lot of the college coaches have already made their choices.
Marty, I think you bring up such a great point too about the balance of running your own race and also knowing the race that other people around you are going to run. And just from the coaching perspective, knowing the personality of your team, because we've been talking a lot about our individual experiences, but you've all been part of great teams and we're building, you know, great teams. And, you know, I'm thinking about how we try to go up against Iona in the MAC, and that's the national class program. So how does Manhattan College compete against that established program? There's going to be a mix of getting out of your comfort zone, where maybe some of my men and women would do well to sit back, but they also need to be in the hunt. And so, I mean, Lisa, you could probably relate to this, those times when maybe you would have preferred a different race strategy, and maybe I encouraged you to try something different. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I do, because I do feel like sometimes you do want to kind of just shoot out and go do your own thing. But some of my best memories and best races have been where I started off with running, even if it was just one or two of my teammates. You know, we kind of had a little plan. Caroline Ferry and I remember my junior year, I think it was, the first few races of the season, we were right next to each other for, I'd say maybe like 75% of the race. And whenever we were going to make a plan to pass somebody, we would say, okay, 1, 2, 3, go. And both of us would just like swarm around them. And I think those races would not have gone as well if, you know, it was just me or just Caroline.
Hey, Matt, you ran Van Cortlandt Park a ton of times. Give us your best memory of Van Cortlandt as a runner.
Well, you know, I gave a lot of credit to Mr. Bowes on helping me strategize for running my 402. But now that Marty chimed in about the best strategy, I'm pissed off at Mr. Bowes, because I think I could have been the course record holder if I didn't listen to him and charge up those hills. I just realized that today. And damn it, I was trying to figure, because I knew I was a better cross-country runner than Gene and Marty. I knew that. And for some reason, they had better times than me, and they won all the time. I got beat by that kid from Maryland Marty was alluding to. And I'm pissed off about this right now. So I don't know if I could talk more. I should talk, because right now I'm really angry at Mr. Bowes, ruining and Jumbo turned me down after cross country, and like Marty said, it probably ruined I probably should have went to Kansas. That's how it probably could. I don't know. I'm all confused, guys. But I lived in the neighborhood, so like Gene, I was out that course every day. And I really was pissed off that I lost, because it was my backyard, the way I looked at it. I knew every rock and stone like Gene did. because every run was through the park. It wasn't that I was smart like Gene. It was just that I was familiar with the course. And I used the wrong strategy, according to Mr. Bowes, with Marty should have flew me in 1972. But it was a great course. I enjoyed it. And like Marty, first time seeing it, still remember it the first time. I came off the subway from Andrew Jackson High School and for the PSAL City Championship, and was overwhelmed by the amount of people, the noise, the excitement. And I think one thing I will add that they didn't mention is the thunder that you heard going across the flats. That when there was 250 people in races, and they went across that flats, that ground shook, and you felt like you were at war. It was definitely a unique feeling. I never felt ground like that. Maybe the NC2A in college would probably be the only other thing that was rivaling that. But that's my feeling. Van Cortlandt Park was more nerve-wracking than anything else on the planet. Maybe the Olympic Games, but certainly Van Cortlandt gave you that extra rush because you waited all summer long. You trained by yourself all summer, usually with a teammate or two, and then you had this, all the teams were there, all the colors. You had your teammates and the guys who, like Marty and Gene and all of us, Carrie, all of us, Lisa, did our homework. We were excited to show our true colors now. We earned the right to win races and kick ass, and we're excited to do that. So that was fun for me.
Can I just jump in there and say, for me, I always felt like the most nerve-wracking part of that course is when you're passing by the bathrooms and you hear the sound of the spikes on the cement. So you're already anticipating that uncomfortable feeling of the spikes on the cement. You hear the other runner spikes on the cement. You have probably a half a mile to go, maybe a little bit more, but that's still very far. You got the whole straightaway, and that's when all of your coaches are screaming at you, telling you to move. And I just felt like that was always the part that made it just caused like a wrench in my stomach.
Hey, Gene, when you were growing up in New York and you chronicled it in your New York Times article about chasing the 4-minute mile in New York, how did you get involved in track and field, and what were you thinking about as far as goals other than the 4-minute mile?
Yeah, it's a great question, Kevin. And it was a transformational moment in my life. I was 13 years old, grew up. I was the oldest of 5 kids growing up in the Bronx in a 2-bedroom apartment. I found out just a couple of years ago we were poor, but I never knew it back then. And I saw a copy of Sports Illustrated in 1971, and there were 2 guys on the cover, and the sinewy arms and muscles coming off the turn in Franklin Field. One guy's name was Jim Ryan, and the other guy was Marty LaCory. I read the article. That evening, I announced or declared to my family that, hey, everybody, I just want to let you know, I can't play the tuba, I can't play the fiddle, I can't play basketball, but I think I can run, and I'm going to break the 4-minute mile. And I was met with indifference at best and rolling eyes and, snoring at the worst. 8 years later, after reading that article and then going to All Hallows and still thinking I was going to be on the basketball team and working out at Macomb Stam Park, which was a cinder track, which now has this gigantic building on top of it called Yankee Stadium. And that's when I learned that this running thing was going to be okay for me. We had a field day my first week as a freshman at All Hallows, and you could go home after you ran 2 events, and I won the 440, it was called, and the 880. Didn't know the difference except one was twice as long as the other, and then got to go home early. And then 8 years later, I graduated from Fordham, and where I went on a scholarship because of my running. Something I never could have done is gone to college without running because my family couldn't afford it. And 8 years later, I did something that I don't think Lisa has probably ever done because she's young, and I wrote a letter. And Lisa, a letter is you take a pen and paper and it's not an email. There was no such thing. And I wrote a letter to a guy on the cover of Sports Illustrated named Marty LaCory. And he wrote me a long letter back and told me that he was in Gainesville, Florida, and he would help me with my dream. He'd get me a job in one of his sporting goods stores. And my life was changed. And, eventually I ran the equivalent, I guess, 342, 1,500 meters in 1980. I got third place behind Filbert Bailly and Steve Ovett. I don't know how that ever happened. And, and then I developed a 40-year career in an industry. So, my avocation and my vocation, because of that article and that cover Sports Illustrated, became the exact same thing.
Marty, when you grew up in New Jersey, you played all different sports, football, probably basketball, baseball. How did you settle on track and field and cross country?
I went to high school thinking I would play baseball and bowl, and but also everybody had that basketball dream. And I was sitting in class, and the kid behind me said, "Oh, you're going out for basketball? Me too. But the coach likes you to go out for cross country to get in shape for basketball." So I showed up, and in my mind, cross country, I thought you had to climb over fences and jump logs and stuff. And I was about the 16th best guy on the freshman team. We had freshman teams and everything. But by the end of the cross country season, the coach said to me, "You're not going to make the basketball team. Those kids all have scholarships. You need to stay with this." And he basically, forced me into it. But the thing I feel bad about today, why was I so dedicated to running right away? Well, I went to a school, Essex Catholic, that every year sent 2 or 3 guys to colleges on scholarship. Freddie Lane, Greg Ryan, these guys went to Georgetown, and Art, another guy went to Holy Cross. So you knew there was a payoff if you just followed this coach and back to Matt's comment, if you were one of the first 3 guys on our cross country team, you probably got a scholarship to a good college. And if you were in the top 7, you probably got it to a secondary college. So I had that to work forward. And that, at the end of my sophomore year, the coach told my parents that I could get a scholarship to college. And that was, as Gene said, I probably wouldn't have been able to go to a major college without that. And right after that, my parents, cooperated as much as they could to give me time to train. But my whole point is a kid in 2020 cannot be assured that there are those college scholarships out there. They might be given to foreign athletes because the coaches want to win right away or whatever reasons. But still today, I think that the whole reason for running is to give you an advantage in your education, that maybe you're not going to get a scholarship, but you're going to get into a better school than you would have otherwise. So I think that's what the payoff is. It's not about, being like Gene and say, I'm going to win the Olympic gold medal. I mean, kids should, be realistic, but know that there is a payoff. And every hour, though it seems like a lot of hours that you put in for training, if you have the talent and you have a coach who knows you have the talent, those hours are going to pay off at, like you made $800 an hour because you got a scholarship to Harvard or Princeton, which costs
Manhattan College.
Yeah.
Well,
and it all starts at Van Cortlandt.
Yeah, that's all right. The Manhattan College right next to it, so.
Yeah, right.
Thank you.
Came real close to going to Manhattan.
Hey, Lisa.
Really?
Lisa, yesterday I was talking to Carrie. I was asking Carrie why. Lisa, yesterday I was talking to Carrie about, why didn't you and Matt recruit Lisa for American? And she told me a story that you wouldn't even take a visit to American. Like, why did you want to run for Manhattan College, and why did you turn down Matt Centrowitz and Carrie Gallagher?
Well, for one thing, I think my 2 top choices were pretty much Fordham and Manhattan College. I think I really just wanted to be right next to the park, and Manhattan College was closer to the park. I really did just like the team atmosphere at Manhattan College. I was pretty much dead set on going there, and I really wanted to stay local. I wasn't, I never really went anywhere far from home. So I don't think I was really ready to make a commitment to move out to DC. But I think in the end, I made the right choice. I mean, Van Cortlandt, I feel like it's my second home. Carrie could tell you that I pretty much owned those loops every day.
I've never seen anybody more dedicated to running long runs in Van Cortlandt Park than Lisa. And as it turns out, since I ended up at Manhattan College 2 years into her college career, I'm kind of glad I didn't get her to American. Coach her, actually just after your first year. So I had you for 3.
Yeah.
Which is really, really fun and a real joy for me. So I definitely had the right idea of trying to get you down to DC. I just had to be a little patient.
And then Centrowitz.
Hey, Matt, how hard has it been?
Please.
Oh,
What's
wait, so
that?
Coach Centrowitz left AU also.
Okay.
And
Hey, Matt, how hard has it been during the
You're breaking up.
Matt? How hard has it been to coach a team during a global pandemic?
Well, Kerry does majority of coaching, so I'll refer to that. But I'm trying to recruit without being able to do home visits, without being able to face-to-face with kids. You can obviously call on phones and we can Zoom around here, but it's not the same as face-to-face handshake. See a kid run up close, personal, see how it responds to your kind of coaching, your kind of language. There has to be that connection. I think Marty, Gene, and Lisa all had top high school coaches that they were connected with, and college coaches. I don't think any of us would have reached the heights we have without great coaches that we were connected with, that made us believe in ourselves at times that we didn't. The three ingredients of an athlete has to believe in his program, his coach, and himself. I know I never doubted my coach or my program. I did doubt myself at times, but thanks to great coaching, they got me over that hurdle in high school and college. So I'm very grateful to all my coach and a lot of my teammates. So I think that's
Kevin, I'm going to jump in on that one because when I think Matt makes a great point. When I moved to Gainesville and at the nice invitation of Marty, I don't think the workouts were anything exceptional. There was nothing that you could read in a book that you couldn't have done yourself. What I did learn was from the neck up. And because I ran every race at Van Cortlandt Park out of fear. I sprinted into those hills because I wanted to get it over with as soon as possible. And so I had to really work on the emotional side and the intellectual side, if you will, of being a successful runner. And that's what I learned down in Gainesville, training with Marty and some of these other guys. And even Matt, and Matt was a year older than me when we were in high school. Matt, he was intimidating even when he warmed up. And it wasn't because he was trying to intimidate us, because he was super focused, and whatever was going on in his mind was really important. And I think the one thing I would say to some of these young people today is, it's one thing to go to a great university that has a great, park across the street from it and all that. But I think the best part about Manhattan is the Kerry Matt thing, because you're going to learn how to think about being a successful runner, not just what the workouts are.
Hey, Kerry, during the pandemic, how has your runners kind of transitioned into this new reality? Like, where are the runners training? Are they training at home, or obviously Van Cortlandt Park? But talk to us a little bit about coaching your athletes and what you're telling them during the pandemic.
Yeah, sure. I mean, Gene and Marty and Matt have all touched on the most important thing is that what's kind of been taken away is the competition and those carrots, those easy carrots that keep you motivated. So we're kind of rediscovering, one, why we're doing it. Why are these athletes on this team? What keeps them going? And where's their true motivation coming from? Because it has to be pretty deep for them to be able to get through the season without being able to compete, without either the gratification of a good race or even the fire that comes from a bad race. And so, you know, when everything first hit and the school completely closed, they were training at home and they had to adapt and they had to make a lot of decisions for themselves and be self-accountable. Now we're back on campus and we have most of the athletes back on campus. We're in the park a lot, but I do have some athletes who are at home who are basically just trying to simulate the training that we do, but given whatever is available to them at home, which will look different. But where the advantage is coming in, what I'm seeing is the opportunity that's coming in is since we're not allowed to work with them more than 8 hours a week. So we went from meeting with them 6 times a week, multiple times a day, to 3 times a week for running workouts, twice a week for lift. So they're doing a lot on, they're doing things on their own. And they have self-accountability. They have to be stretching, rolling, and we're not sitting here telling them to do it. And one of the great things about that is that they have to go inward and decide that they want to do it. They're not just doing it to please me. They're not doing it to please Matt. They're doing it because they believe in the goals that they set for themselves, and they had to commit to that in a different way because of the pandemic, because of the limitations that we have. And so my greatest joy in participating in the sport at all these different levels is exactly what Jean is saying, is that you learn that it's not really about the details of the training. That parts of that are important, but a lot of coaches understand that. But what are we educating these athletes on outside of the training itself? How do they compete? How do they approach races? How do we build that confidence within them that they know they have the tools to compete given any circumstances? Marty alluded to it earlier. Tactical races happen. So it's not just who can run the fastest most of the time. It's, who can run the fastest that day given the way the race plays out. So we've just had to be very flexible, very open in our communication, and very self-accountable in the pandemic. That's how we've been managing through.
Jean, this is being streamed over BronxNet right now. And if a child's out there and wants to get involved in running, you're a native of the Bronx, what would you recommend? How would it be Van Cortlandt, or how does a kid get involved in track and field in New York City or cross country?
Yeah, you know what, Kevin, I think Marty, Matt, and I had these experiences where there was this moment, whether it be tryout for the basketball team, that somehow led us to the sport. So we were fortunate that way. I think the beauty of the sport is just put the left foot in front of the right foot. There was a basketball coach in Texas years ago, a college coach named Abe Lemons, and he kept getting fired. He finally got his last job, I think, at Texas A&M, and they said, "Coach, if you are," oh boy, Matt and Kerry aren't going to like this. If you are fired from this job, what are you going to do? And he said, "You know what? If I get fired from this job, I'm going to come back as a track coach, because all you have to do is say, son, go out there, stay to your left, and get back here as fast as you can." And while we know that's not really true, there is some beauty in the fact that, particularly in a pandemic, wouldn't it be great if kids just crossed the street, in Riverdale or in the Bronx, and went to Van Cortlandt and just started by walking around that beautiful place, then taking a couple of steps and a couple of jogs, and then also challenge other kids to, hey, come on out with me, and maybe we can just race from, that imaginary starting line to the pole, as Marty called it. And, I just think it comes with, I think there has to be encouragement. It comes from home and parents, and it definitely should come from teachers, and they don't have to be gym teachers or coaches. But I do think that I'm trying to figure out a way, actually, to give back to this sport after all these years, and how good it's been to me, on how to get kids just to go on out there and put one foot in front of the other.
Marty, everyone talks about what a great runner you are, and they probably forget the fact that you've been a very successful businessman. You've been a great broadcaster. Talk to us about how track and field, what you learned about track and field, how that helped your professional career, and maybe even taking it to now that you're a noted jazz guitarist. Like, how does track kind of involved and fed all those other interests?
Well, I think track is one of the best sports for preparing you for life, because to go back to how do you get kids involved, one thing I think is to keep a log. And when you write in a log and see that you are running more miles, or you're running faster, even if you're not competing, that gives you a self-confidence. So the basic thing that running does every one of us who ran the first time, I was not even allowed to run the mile till the end of my sophomore year because the coach said I was not strong enough. So a 5-minute mile in the town I grew up in, nobody in the high school ever ran under men ran under 5 minutes. So a 5-minute mile seemed very hard to me. So fast forward, 4 years and you've run a 4-minute mile. And the thing that instills in you is that all things that you take up at first seem impossible. I sat in this living room 20 years ago, 3 feet from here, and I was a horrible guitar player. And I continued to play horribly like that. So my kids would see that someday I would actually be a good guitar player, but they'll remember how bad I was. But I guess the point is, over and over again, you realize that everyone puts on their pants one leg at a time, and that everybody's horrible at new things when they try them, but it's slow. And it was great when the book came out talking about 10,000 hours that you put into something before you're good at it. And that sort of works out with track and field. It kind of worked out with the guitar, that I put in about 10,000 hours before I got to the point where I was happy with what I was doing. But the other side of that is too, and I had told my musician friends this, and Freddie Dwyer told me this as a kid: do not read your newspaper reviews. Don't believe you're so good. And what I told the musicians is, look, these people coming up to you telling you how great you are probably have never heard a live saxophone player before. They probably have never heard a jazz guitar player. One time, somebody asked a kid if he had ever seen me play the guitar, and he goes, "Oh yeah, that's the guy who sits down when he plays." Well, that told me that this kid, even though he was into music, had never seen a jazz guitar player. I grew up in New Jersey. All the guitar players sat down. They were jazz guitar players. But my point here is really that each of those things you mentioned about me at the beginning, I thought, geez, how does Howard Cosell do that? I mean, eventually, that you can do it. It's just a matter of putting in the time. Oh, but about the story about the musicians, I said, when those people come up from the audience and tell you how good you are, don't listen to them, because they don't know what they're talking about. The only guys you need to listen to are the 3 other guys in the band. And in track, the only guys you need to listen to is your coach, not some kid off the street who thinks you're really good because you can run 55 seconds in the 400, and you don't have the build for running distance. You have to listen to experts.
Carrie, we've talked a lot about Van Cortlandt Park, but where are some other places in the Bronx that would be good places for people to run?
Well, one place I can think of right off the bat is the Williamsbridge Oval. That track was redone when I was in college, so not that short ago, but not that long ago. And there's a turf field on the inside of it and a few tennis courts. It's a pretty big park. A lot of people in the neighborhood use it. So that's a great resource. And tracks are kind of easy because one, it's a very controlled terrain. So if you're coming into running or walking or jogging and you're new to it, it's a good way, kind of a safe way to come in and start to build yourself up. So the Williamsbridge Oval is a good one. But honestly, the beautiful part about running is that you can kind of do it anywhere. Ideally, maybe a little bit less traffic if you can. But Pelham Bay Park has a bunch of bike trails and a track over there. Pelham Parkway has a bike path along the whole thing that connects to the Bronx River Parkway bike path. So I think you're seeing a lot of, and this probably is new to the Bronx from when, Matt and Jean were growing up here, but there's a lot of, the parks have done a lot to kind of connect the opportunities. So whether you're on a bike or running, you can put together some pretty good places to train right here in the Bronx. But I have to plug Van Cortlandt as being the premier spot for sure.
Nice to have it in your backyard there.
Yeah, very much so.
Hey, Jean, talk to us about, we talked a little bit about in the beginning about your business career and all the great jobs you've had and over 40 years in that business. how did that start? Like from when you were at All Hallows and then you went to Fordham, how did you get involved in the business, and what did you what did you learn from running that you could later bring to your professional career?
Yeah, you know what, Kevin, and Marty alluded to it earlier. Listen, the accomplishments are just a resume, and your resume may get you an interview, but it's your character that gets you the job. And any athletic achievement that I had, and I had a way more modest career than our guests on this call today. It was how I got there. And I used those skills and those abilities. First of all, self-motivation. You have to get up in the morning by yourself, go run by yourself 5 miles in the morning. So you have self-motivation. The other one is the idea of this focus, you know, seeing that when you're on a track. I remember, and Marty and Kerry and Lisa and Matt can attest to this, when you're on a track, even if you're in Franklin Field or even if you're in the Olympics, actually, the only thing you hear going around the track are spikes hitting the track and people breathing. You don't hear the crowd. You focus. The other thing that I learned was that you have to be strategic in everything you do. So I love the 1,500 meters and the mile because I don't have a long attention span. So 4 minutes was enough for me. But that's just enough time where it was a combination of you had to have strength, speed, but mostly smarts. And you were able to just judge what was going on around you and increase your peripheral vision. And all of those things, you know, gave birth for me what turned out to be a 40-year career. I was at Nike for 21 years. I was at Reebok, Under Armour. I was the president of Timberland, and then, of course, the president of ASICS. And it wasn't my athletic accomplishments that got me those roles. It was the things I learned while I was preparing to be an athlete, or the things that I, displayed when I was on the track competing that helped me be successful. And I'll stand by that comment for as long as I'm alive. And I guarantee you, so would everybody else on this call.
Hey, Matt, I'm getting a lot of questions from people who are pinging me here. They want, with the season was mostly washed out this year because of the pandemic, but people ask me, what's up with Matthew, your son, and how's he training? What's he looking forward to?
Actually, next week's his birthday. He's turning 31. We're kind of discussing, that's our topic this week, where he's going to fly me for his birthday. That's what I'm like. Hopefully go someplace exotic so I could help him blow out the candles. But yeah, he's training. I don't really get into that anymore. As Marty and Gene know, and Carrie and Lisa, at this level, it's he's doing fine. He's running. He's enjoying it. And there's other things, you know, right now with the downtime, he's using his time for other goals and, certain other things he's doing outside. Because obviously at 31, next week is, this is probably his last year or two. I'm assuming we never had that discussion, but I don't really stay to day-to-day stuff with him. And one of the things that I talked to Marty when Matthew was a youngster, and then Gene was my neighbor when Matthew and his son Patrick was christened 30-something years ago or 28 years ago. And as a parent, the best thing you do is you put them on the right course and you get out of the way. And Marty asked what I did with them, and I said, basically, get out of the way. And that's basically when you have, you sound the foundation, you get them going, just like your runners. The number one rule of coaching is don't overcoach. And I learned that in college and high school. We watched some coaches, and Marty and Gene did. The coaches don't tie your shoes. They don't carry your sweats. You do everything yourself, and that's what the kind of households, all five of us, that Gallagher household does not pick up your dirty laundry off the floor for you. I can assure you that. And I think, Marty, we all know that, but that's basically what I do. So I'm really not the resource to answer that question, but he's doing great. He's happy, and hopefully stays healthy at the right time. And obviously now is not the right time. I'm not that concerned about how healthy he is, but he's doing fine. He's training a lot and stuff like that.
I saw it ran an 800. I saw a time like a couple weeks
ago. Did an 800 on it, the first one back. He was supposed to have a couple more of them, but didn't pan out for one reason or another. And so He's fine though. But that's the other thing of Marty and Gene and I, and obviously Marty was alluding to it, and Gene. It was a different era during our time, and I'm probably only one that stayed in the sport, one where, as a coach or an athlete, the last 50 years. So I've experienced it firsthand, not watched it. And the reason why kids join today is a lot different than Marty and Gene and I. And obviously with my children, they all joined for different reasons. And my older daughter, Lauren, she joined, which was very attractive to her, is that the social aspects of track, individual sports. She loved the fact that my best friends were Gene McCarthy, John Lovett, guys that were on my high school teams. These names, that's why we're still here. Like my boss just texted me saying how great Gene and I, and we're still great friends. We were great competitors at each other 50 years ago, 45 years ago. But we're great friends. This is the bonds you build. There's other things besides winning races and getting scholarships. These are intangible things that I want to thank Marty and Gene for coming on this call. I just called them up, and they immediately said yes, and they didn't have to do that. But that's the bonds that track does, and the people that are tuning in here today, I'm sure, feel that way about their teammates, their competitors even, are their best friends. And we have that mutual respect for each other because we know, like Gene said, we got up every morning, we tied our shoes, went out, rain, snow, or sleet. We went out and did our 5 miles. In the afternoon, we went out and did another 10. And I don't care if you're Villanova, Manhattan College, or University of Chicago, we all do suffer that way. And that's why we're brothers and comrades together this way. And whether it's Lisa or Carrie or Marty, we all do it. But that's our friendship and bond. You meet another runner and you automatically, you hear his times, you know where he stands, and and how much they enjoyed it and the stories. So anyway, I just wanted to plug that in, Kevin. So hopefully that makes
Amen. Hey, so we're out of our allotted time here, and I just want to thank the panel for joining us here today. I think it was very helpful. Hopefully this time next year we have 10,000 people and 40-some races in Van Cortlandt Park, and we're back to semi-normal with the Manhattan College Invitational. But I wanted to thank everybody for joining us today.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure
Yeah.
Thank you, Marty.
to see you.
It was an honor and a pleasure. Thank you, everybody.
Yes, thank you very much.